Well, Alicia Kearns is the Conservative MP for Rutland and Melton and a member of the China Research Group. Hello, Alicia.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing okay, thank you.
I'm glad to hear it.
Has China been transparent enough?
I do have concerns over the legitimacy of China's official data. And I think it's really difficult. You know, all countries have struggled with data and all countries have struggled knowing how to respond because this is a new virus. But sadly, I don't trust that we will ever know the full extent of the virus in China. And I think, unfortunately, you know, when you're in a pandemic, the most important thing is cooperation, the sharing of data and information. And I think, sadly, that has been compromised. And we saw today the decision by Number 10 to remove Chinese data from their daily briefings. And I think the reason we're worried is China has a history of systemic underreporting of outbreaks. You know, we had the SARS outbreak. Only in 2018, there was something called the African swine flu pandemic, where more than 100 million pigs were killed. And the main reason why, and that spread to more than 10 other Asian countries. And the big issue there was that local officials were so scared of reporting to central government in China that there was a major issue for fear of being blamed, that it was just got completely out of control. So unfortunately, I do have some genuine concerns about the data.
So how does this tally with the fact that it was the World Health Organization, Alicia, who were praising China in the early stages for its transparency in sharing data?
I think it's enormously difficult for the WHO as well, but I don't believe the WHO has covered itself in glory during this pandemic. You know, for example, I'm concerned by how wholeheartedly they praised China's response so early on before they'd even visited the country. You know, they were saying that undetected cases were rare. They were taking Beijing's numbers at face value. They ignored warnings from Taiwanese doctors.
Why would they do that?
Effusive. I think it's an incredibly difficult thing during a pandemic where the WHO treads a very difficult line at all times, where they're trying to keep all of the countries they support or involved with and engage with them. And the fact is, at an early stage, before you visited a country, the likelihood is that you will take, to a great extent, at face value, what a country reports to you. We didn't know a lot about the virus then, but I think the fact that the WHO accepted China's reporting as it did delay and hamper our understanding, unfortunately.
So do you think that had China been completely upfront, do you think this virus could have been contained in China?
It's very difficult and we'll never know. And I think it's quite dangerous looking back like that. And if we are to try and come to that sort of conclusion, we'll need a full inquiry. Although in the interview that you clipped earlier, the Deputy Ambassador goes on to say that they wouldn't accept any type of inquiry because they think it would be too political. China, like the UK, is a hub, people flying in and out all the time. It would be very difficult to work this out, but that is why you would bring in the experts to do so. But I do think it was too slow, and I think the reason it was too slow unfortunately came down to issues. Do you know what, for me, it's actually less about the speed that was concerning, but the manner of the response. So as I said, you know, in a pandemic, it's about sharing information. You know, Wuhan authorities arrested people for sharing false information, one of them a doctor who was a whistleblower. You know, there was a period in January where China reported 0 new cases of coronavirus. There's been spreading of disinformation. You know, China's foreign ministry spokesperson said that the US Army might have brought coronavirus to China. And there's reports of China putting pressure on neighbouring countries to stay open so that China didn't look like it had such a bad COVID response. So for me, it's less so much about the speed at which they operated, which obviously needs looking into, but that's not something I can comment on. But the manner of their response is what concerns me.
But what I don't understand is that when they were reporting 0 new cases, which clearly was not true, how did they think? Because they must have been looking at data to show just how aggressive and contagious this was. Like, how did they think that that was not going to be found out very quickly?
Unfortunately, I have to hope that that wasn't the case, that they were looking at data and just chose to outright lie. I have to hope that they had issues with reporting or there was some sort of issue. But ultimately, this is an authoritarian regime. And like I said, when it came to swine flu pandemic, a lot of it comes down to that fear that is inbred within the system of local authorities not wanting to suggest to the central government that there is an issue, that there is a concern locally, and somehow they might have been failing and therefore be blamed for it.
So there's a big political decision to be made around the world, isn't there, by governments, which is when they establish what China did or didn't do, what type of punishment or ramifications should there be if any of this was deliberate? because that will warn a regime the next time there's something like this, how quickly they should behave. Like, should China be paying a penalty for this?
I mean, I think you're completely right. There will be a lot of questions and there should be an inquiry. Like I said, right now the focus should be on saving lives and doing everything we can. In terms of our relationship going forward, our relationship with China can't be zero sum. It can't be either they're our best friend or they're our most hostile enemy. China's a very unique beast, and I think it needs nuance and pragmatism, but ultimately we need to better understand what drives China's objectives internationally, and that comes from a better understanding, I believe, of their domestic interests, their objectives and their pressures, and therefore understanding why they might have done this deliberately. I have to say, I don't have much time for the concept of reparations and so on. I don't think that's the right course or the right path to pursue, but I would hope that China will change its position of today, where it just said point blank, we won't accept an inquiry because it would be politically riddled, and recognise that actually what we need to do after this is come together, create a joint counter-pandemic unit of some sort, vaccine development programmes around the world, and that requires really hard looking at ourselves, as every single country I imagine will do once this is over.
Yeah, because you talk about this inquiry and what we should or shouldn't be doing to China. I wonder how unforgiving the British government, the British public is going to be of your party and your government, who ultimately your job is to protect citizens in this country. Your job was to protect nurses and doctors, and you left our nurses and doctors, your government, your party did, without PPE.
Well, ultimately, when we get through this, the government will want to review how did this start? How did we get to where we got to? Why couldn't we have stopped it earlier? What more could have been done? I have every confidence that will happen. It isn't the right time now. We need to learn as we go, but a full inquiry, I'm sure, will happen afterwards. But, in Rutland and Melton, in terms of PPE, I know we have the adequate PPE locally. And I know that because I speak to the doctors, to the care homes, to shops, you name it, to social workers and to local resilience fund every single day. And there were always going to be issues. My background is counter-terrorism, where you know the enemy, you can see where the enemy are.
Sorry, there has not been sufficient PPE, Alicia. I can say this with confidence. There has not been sufficient PPE in the United Kingdom. How do I know that? Because I've heard from doctors and nurses and care workers and domiciliary workers across the breadth of the UK, some of them crying, some of them fearful for their lives, some of them having to try to buy it for themselves. And the British government didn't give it to them.
So, Stephen, as I said, Rutland and Melton, I said we have adequate PPE, and I know that for a fact. And then I said there have been issues, because there always were going to be issues. A country can't go from a standing start of not expecting the pandemic to a pandemic. There were always going to be issues. And my heart goes out to everyone who's been working so hard on the front line. I've been working with some incredible local companies in Rutland and Melton who have turned their entire businesses around and been creating the most amazing PPE. I think we've got about 30,000 face visors being made a week just in small Rutland and Melton. So absolutely, there will be lessons to be learned. There will absolutely be mistakes that have been made or opportunities missed. That is what happens in a crisis. But I do believe that the government has done everything it can to step forward and to support people.
OK, Alicia, thank you very much. Thank you.